The crew of the Star Voyager had been traveling through deep space for weeks, exploring new planets and gathering data. It was a routine mission, something they had done countless times before. But today, something was different. As they drifted through the empty void, a strange signal suddenly blared across their communication systems. At first, they thought it was a glitch or just another interference. But when the signal continued, its urgency became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just random noise, it was a message. A voice, weak but desperate, echoed through the ship's speakers. "Help us, we're trapped," the voice said, crackling through the static. "Please, you're our last hope. SOS, coordinates. X-235. X-235. The crew's lead scientist, Dr. Alan Ward, was the first to react. He jumped from his seat, his face pale, his heart racing. This wasn't a typical distress signal. This was something far more serious. The crew had encountered distress signals before, but none like this. Most were either false alarms or outdated calls from long-forgotten spaceships. But this felt different. "Where is it coming from?" Commander Maria Holt asked as she turned to Dr. Ward. Dr. Ward quickly ran a scan of the signal's coordinates. His fingers flew across the control panel as he tried to make sense of the message. The screen flashed with data, and the room fell silent as the tension grew. The coordinates led to an uncharted region of space, far beyond any known colonies or systems. "It's from an unknown source," Dr. Ward said, his voice low. "The location is in the middle of a dead zone. No ships have passed through that area for centuries." Commander Holt frowned. This was not what she had expected. A distress signal from a dead zone. There was no reason for any ships to be there, let alone send out an SOS. Still, they had a duty to investigate. The Star Voyager was one of the few ships equipped to explore the unknown. And it wasn't like them to turn away from a call for help. "Prepare a response," Commander Holt ordered. "We need to send a reply." But before anyone could react, another voice came through the comm system. This time, it wasn't the same weak and desperate tone. It was clear, and it carried a sense of warning. "Do not respond. Do not come. Leave this sector immediately. The ones who come will never leave." The voice was calm but chilling. It was as though whoever was speaking knew what would happen next. The entire crew froze. The warning was unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't just a plea for help. It was a command, an order that sent a shiver down their spines. Commander Holt felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew that any response to this message could be dangerous, but she was also aware of the duty she had to fulfill. The crew couldn't just ignore a call for help, no matter how ominous the warning. Still, there was something about the message that didn't sit right with her. "Shut down the communication system," Holt instructed. "Let's pull away from this area and run a full diagnostic. We need to make sure this isn't some kind of trap." But just as they began to make preparations to leave the sector, a loud bang echoed throughout the ship. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned as if it were being pulled by some invisible force. "What was that?" shouted Lieutenant Marcus Thompson, the ship's engineer, as he scrambled to secure the systems. "We're being pulled in," Dr. Ward said, his voice trembling. He was staring at the screen, his eyes wide with shock. The ship's engines had powered down, and they were now being dragged toward the coordinates they had just scanned. "Pull up. Increase power to the engines," Holt shouted, but it was too late. The ship was already moving on its own. its path set toward the unknown destination. "We can't fight it," Marcus said, his voice strained. "It's like the ship is being magnetically drawn in. We're locked on." Commander Holt clenched her fists, trying to stay calm. She had seen many things in her years as a commander, but this was something she had never encountered. The crew was being pulled into a trap, one they couldn't escape from. The message had been clear: the ones who come will never leave. With no choice but to follow the pull, Commander Holt ordered the crew to prepare for whatever awaited them. The dark unknown loomed ahead, and the Star Voyager was speeding toward it with no way to stop. The message had been received, and now they were heading straight into the heart of the mystery. The Star Voyager continued its relentless pull toward the coordinates, the ship's engines unable to break free from the mysterious force. The crew was on edge, every second bringing them closer to an unknown fate. The once quiet hum of the ship was now filled with the tense murmur of worried voices. "We're almost there," Dr. Ward said, his voice trembling as he studied the flashing screen. "We'll be within range of the source in just a few minutes." Commander Holt stood at the front of the room, her face a mask of determination. She had led her crew through dangerous missions before, but this was different. The unknown was never easy, but the sheer unpredictability of their situation gnawed at her. "What do we know about this area?" she asked, trying to calm herself. "Anything at all?" Dr. Ward glanced up from the console. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's a black hole in the records. Not a single known ship has entered this sector in centuries. There's no mention of the alien race or civilization that might be in this region." Lieutenant Thompson, the ship's engineer, was deep in thought. "Commander, I'm seeing something strange on the radar. There are shadows in space, multiple large objects, but they're not registering as ships or stations. It's like they're camouflaged." "What do you mean, camouflaged?" Holt asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Thompson hesitated for a moment before speaking. Again, "It's as if the ships are hidden within the fabric of space itself. They're using some kind of cloaking technology, but it's advanced, too advanced for anything we've ever encountered." The room fell silent. Holt's gaze moved over to the navigation console, where a faint blip began to appear on the edge of the screen. The Star Voyager was approaching its destination. "Prepare for contact," Holt ordered, her voice sharp. "We're not going to back down now." The ship's sensors came alive as they crossed into the unknown sector. The hum of the ship's systems shifted as the hidden ships revealed themselves, and the true size of the threat became clear. At least 20 enormous vessels emerged from the shadows, their sleek, dark forms gliding silently toward the Star Voyager. They were unlike any ships the crew had ever seen, long and angular, with weapons that seemed to glow with an eerie, unnatural light. Then a voice echoed across the communication system. It was the same calm, cold voice that had warned them. "Earlier, you should have heeded the warning," the voice said. "Now you will face the consequences." The crew went silent as the implications of those words sank in. The fleet was not just here for a confrontation. They were here to destroy. Holt's mind raced, but she kept her face stoic. She couldn't afford to let her crew see fear. They needed leadership, not panic. "Raise shields. Prepare for battle," Holt commanded. But even as the crew scrambled to prepare for the worst, a new message flashed across the main screen. It wasn't a voice, but a symbol sigil of a dark, twisted design. It glowed ominously as it appeared, pulsing with an unsettling Energy. Dr. Ward's fingers danced over the console, trying to decipher the meaning of the symbol. His face went pale as the image shifted, showing what appeared to be an ancient map. "It's a warlord's insignia," he said, his voice quivering. "A symbol used by the Deathworlders, an ancient race of conquerors. Legends say they control entire sectors of the galaxy, and they are feared by every civilization." The room went cold. The Deathworlders, the name itself sent a ripple of fear through the crew. They were known across the galaxy for their merciless conquests. If these ships truly belonged to them, then the crew was facing a threat unlike anything they had ever imagined. Suddenly, the communication system crackled to life again. This time, the voice was accompanied by a deep, rumbling growl. "You are trespassing on our territory," the voice said. "Your presence is an insult. You will not leave here alive." Without warning, the ships around them began to move. The Deathworlders' fleet advanced with terrifying speed, their weapons charging with deadly intent. The Star Voyager shook as the first blast struck the shields. "We can't hold them off," Lieutenant Thompson shouted. "Their weapons are too powerful." The crew had only moments to react. The Deathworlders' fleet didn't just have the technology to cloak themselves. They had weapons capable of overwhelming the Star Voyager in a matter of minutes. "Prepare the escape pods," Holt ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "If we can't fight, we need to survive." But just as they began to power up the escape pods, another message came through. This one was different, far more menacing. "We are not just here to destroy you. We are here to teach you a lesson in fear." Holt's heart sank. The Deathworlders were no ordinary conquerors, they were something far worse. And now, they had a new target. The Star Voyager was caught in the full might of the Deathworlders' fleet. With every passing second, the immense ships seemed to grow larger on the radar, their dark forms closing in like an inevitable storm. The crew scrambled to prepare. For a battle they had no chance of winning. Commander Holt paced back and forth, her mind racing for a plan, any plan, to get them out of this situation alive. Every choice seemed equally grim. The Deathworlders had no interest in negotiations. They had made their intentions clear. They were here to destroy, to conquer. Holt's hand clenched around the console, her knuckles white with tension. "Status report." She shouted over the chaos that enveloped the bridge. "Shields are holding at 40%. Lieutenant Thompson said, his voice strained. "But their weapons are too much for us. We won't last much longer at this rate, Captain." Dr. Ward called from his station, his voice frantic. "The ship's core is beginning to destabilize from the energy drain. We can't keep up the defenses much longer. If we don't do something soon, we'll be a sitting target." Holt felt a surge of anger rise within her. She couldn't believe this was happening. A few hours ago, they had been exploring the vast unknown, and now they were fighting for their lives against an ancient, deadly race. "We have to make a decision, Commander," Dr. Ward added. "Either we fight and risk being destroyed, or we escape and hope for the best." Escape was the safer option, but Holt knew the reality: they didn't have much time. The Deathworlders' fleet was closing in. If they tried to escape now, the fleet would simply hunt them down. The only choice they had was to face them head-on. In a last-ditch attempt to survive, "Prepare the weapons," Holt ordered her, voice low and determined. "If we're going down, we'll go down fighting." The crew sprang into action, moving with precision as the Star Voyager came alive with the sounds of weapons systems charging. The massive ship was no match for the Deathworlders' fleet in terms of firepower, but they had one advantage: speed and maneuverability. If they could outmaneuver the enemy, they might just be able to buy enough time to escape the sector. The first wave of blasts from the Deathworlders' ships shook the Star Voyager violently, the force of the attack sending the crew stumbling. But the ship's shields held for a few more seconds, just long enough to fire back. The crew cheered as the enemy's lead ship took a hit, but it was nothing more than a scratch. The Deathworlders were too advanced. Holt watched in horror as the enemy fleet began to circle them, cutting off every possible escape route. Every time the Star Voyager moved, the fleet matched their every move, like predators stalking their prey. Their weapons fired again, this time with devastating accuracy. One of their blasts hit the engines, sending the ship lurching forward. "We're losing power," Marcus Thompson yelled, his voice filled with panic. "If we don't regain control, we'll crash." The ship began to spin uncontrollably, the crew thrown into chaos. Holt grabbed onto the console, trying to steady herself. They were being forced into a corner with no way out. "This is it," Dr. Ward said softly. "They've got us. We're done." But Holt refused to give in. She wasn't ready to let her crew die without a fight. She knew there had to be something more they could do. A sudden thought struck her. "The escape pods," she muttered, her eyes widening with realization. "We have to use the pods." "What?" Lieutenant Thompson snapped. "But we can't just abandon ship. We'll never survive alone." Holt turned to him, her expression firm. "We won't survive here, Marcus. Not with their fleet closing in. But if we eject the pods, spread them out, and make it look like we're all scattered, maybe, just maybe, we'll have a chance to regroup and warn the galaxy." There was no time to argue. Holt's plan was their only hope. The crew immediately began the evacuation procedures, preparing the pods for launch. As they launched, Holt's heart pounded. They would be scattered across the sector, lost and vulnerable. But it was their best shot at survival. As the last pod launched, Holt watched the Star Voyager one final time. The once proud ship now drifted helplessly, its hull torn and battered by the onslaught. The Deathworlders' fleet surrounded them, their massive ships looming like vultures, waiting for the inevitable. The Star Voyager was no more. The crew had been scattered, but their fight wasn't over. Holt's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. How would they survive? How would they warn others about the Deathworlders? Would they ever be able to reunite? And most importantly, what had they truly unleashed by responding to that SOS? The escape pods scattered across the empty void of space, each one carrying a handful of survivors from the Star Voyager. Commander Holt had made the hardest decision of her life, but now they were alone, each pod drifting in the cold silence of the unknown. The last thing she saw before her pod was ejected from the wreckage was the Star Voyager, once mighty. Ship now broken and abandoned, surrounded by the imposing fleet of the Deathworlders. The feeling of helplessness gnawed at her. Inside her pod, she couldn't help but think back to the warning they had received earlier, the words of the Deathworlders. "We are not just here to destroy you. We are here to teach you a lesson." It echoed in her mind as she drifted through space, her heart heavy with dread. Holt wasn't sure where the others had ended up, but she knew they had to stay alive. They had to survive long enough to warn the galaxy. She glanced at the pod's radar, which flickered weakly, showing only empty space ahead. For now, she was alone. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp beep, a signal, weak. But it was something. She quickly checked the console. finding that it was another distress signal different from the one they had followed earlier, but still unmistakably alien. It was faint, but the coordinates were disturbingly familiar. The signal was coming from within the heart of the Deathworlders fleet. It was a strange thing to consider an alien signal, hidden right in the middle of a fleet of the galaxy's most feared conquerors. She tried to decipher it, but it was like no language she had ever encountered. The patterns didn't make sense, yet there was a strange sense of urgency behind them. The signal began to fade, but Holt had already keyed it into the pod's navigation system. She had no idea where it would lead her, but it felt like something she couldn't ignore as she maneuvered the pod toward the signal. Holt's mind raced with possibilities. What if the Deathworlders were not the only threat? What if there were other forces at play? Here forces even older and more powerful than the Deathworlders themselves. She had to find out. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Thompson's pod was drifting at the edge of an asteroid field. His survival instincts kicked in the moment he ejected, and he quickly set the pod to autopilot. As the pod coasted into the rocky landscape, he took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. But his thoughts kept returning to the fate of the Star Voyager. He had barely managed to escape, and now he was in a field of large, jagged asteroids, an ideal hiding place, but a dangerous one. The asteroid field could be their salvation or their tomb. He activated the ship's exterior scanners, desperately trying to gather intel, but the signal interference was maddening. Suddenly, the pod's monitor flashed red. His eyes widened as he saw a massive shape appear on the screener ship. An enormous one, unlike anything he had ever seen. Its surface was black, rippling with strange energy waves, and it was heading directly toward him. Thompson's hands shook as he tried to power the pod's engines. But before he could react, a booming voice filled his cockpit. "We see you, little one. Do not think you can hide from us. You are already ours." Thompson's blood ran cold. The Deathworlders had found him, and with their technology, they could track him anywhere in the vast emptiness of space. The ship's engines roared to life, but the control panel began to malfunction. It was clear he was locked into their systems. Desperation filled his mind as he glanced around the cockpit for anything he could use. The atmosphere grew thick with the realization that, no matter how fast he moved, the Deathworlders were in control. Across the galaxy, Dr. Ward's pod hurtled toward a distant star system. He had no way of knowing where he was going, but his mind was focused on one thing: survival. There were no immediate threats, but his loneliness gnawed at him. His thoughts often wandered to the Star Voyager, and his failure to protect it. But something else was bothering him, something he couldn't shake. During their final moments on the Star Voyager, he had noticed something strange on one of the Deathworlders' ships, an insignia unlike anything he had ever seen. It resembled an ancient symbol, but its meaning was unclear. It was too distinct to be a coincidence. Whatever this symbol represented, it was important. He needed to learn more about it. But first, he had to survive long enough to make it back to civilization. As his pod coasted into an uncharted system, a bright light suddenly flashed before his eyes. A planet that wasn't on any map. Dr. Ward didn't hesitate. He set the pod to autopilot and prepared to land. The planet looked barren, but something about it felt off. A dark presence lingered in the air. Was this place linked to the Deathworlders, or was it something more? He couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: the moment he set foot on that planet, he would be taking the next step toward understanding the true nature of their enemies. As each survivor drifted into their own desperate journey, the Deathworlders' grip on the galaxy tightened. The ancient, relentless fleet continued its march through space, their weapons poised for destruction. But the true extent of their power was still a mystery, one that the scattered crew of the Star Voyager would soon uncover. Their journey had only just begun. The cold, endless void of space had never seemed more oppressive. Each pod floated in isolation, their occupants alone in the darkness. Commander Holt's pod drifted toward the heart of the Deathworlders' fleet, drawn to the mysterious alien signal, while Lieutenant Thompson fought to evade capture in the asteroid field. Dr. Ward, on the other hand, had set his sights on an unknown planet, sensing that the answers they sought might be buried there. Yet, as their paths began to converge in the vast emptiness of space, none of them realized the danger that awaited them. Commander Holt, her pod silently approached the coordinates of the alien signal, the flickering lights on her control panel growing dimmer with each passing minute. The signal's frequency had shifted again, almost as if it were alive, pulsing and changing, like the heartbeat of a dying star. Holt could feel her pulse quicken as she neared the source. Suddenly, the pod's systems lit up, warning her of an incoming ship. It was massive, its dark silhouette looming in the distance. At first, she thought it was a Deathworlder ship, but as it drew closer, something felt different. It wasn't like anything she had seen before. The ship's shape was angular, unlike the sleek designs of the Deathworlders. It looked older, ancient, and worn, but its energy signature was powerful, far beyond any technology the Star Voyager had ever encountered. As the unknown ship approached, Holt's communication system flickered to life. A voice echoed in her pod, deep and cold, carrying the weight of centuries. "You have found us, Commander Holt. You have crossed into our domain." The voice sent a chill down her spine. It was neither friendly nor hostile. It simply was, as if this presence had existed long before her, before the Deathworlders. "Who are you?" Holt asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her throat. The voice responded without hesitation. "We are the keepers of the void, the ones who watched and waited. Your presence here disturbs the balance." Holt tried to process the words. The keepers of the void. She had never heard of them, but there was no denying their power. They had to be the ones who had sent the signal. But why? "The Deathworlders are a plague," the voice continued. "They destroy, conquer, and consume without understanding. The consequences you are the first to question them. You will be the key." Suddenly, the alien ship released a pulse of energy, and the pod was surrounded by a shimmering field of light. Holt's pod shook violently as the shields tried to absorb the energy. "You are not alone," the voice warned. "Others have already set the stage. The galaxy's fate is in motion. What you do next will decide everything." Holt's mind raced. She had been led here by an unknown force, but now the weight of her choices pressed down on her. The signal had not just been a call for help, it was a warning. A warning that the galaxy was on the brink of something far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The alien ship began to move away, slowly disappearing into the darkness, leaving Holt with more questions than answers. But she now understood that the Deathworlders were not the only enemy in the galaxy. There was something far older, more dangerous, lurking in the shadows. Lieutenant Thompson, the asteroid field had become a deadly maze, with Thompson barely managing to avoid collisions as the massive Deathworlder ship tracked his every move. His heart raced as he felt the ship's presence closing in. He was running out of time. His sensors detected the ominous ships approaching, their cloaking devices disengaging, revealing their terrifying forms. One of the ships fired a warning shot, narrowly missing Thompson's pod. The blast sent him spiraling, but he regained control just in time. He punched in the coordinates to the nearest inhabited system, praying that he could make it there before the Deathworlders caught up. But just as he initiated the jump sequence, his pod shook violently, and the cockpit lights flickered. The Deathworlders had locked onto him. "Do you think you can escape?" The voice boomed through the pod's comm system. "You cannot run. You cannot hide." Thompson's heart pounded in his chest. He was trapped. Before he could react, the ship's control systems went offline. The pod's navigation failed. It was as if the Deathworlders had hijacked every part of the pod, locking him in place. Desperation surged within him. He had one option left. He launched the pod's emergency thrusters and aimed directly for the asteroid field again, hoping to lose them in the dense clouds of rocks. But before he could make the move, another voice cut through the comm system, this one completely different, sharp and commanding. "Do not run, Lieutenant," it said. "You are needed. Do not make the same mistake as your commander. Join us, and you will have the power to stop them. The Deathworlders are nothing but pawns. The real battle is yet to come." Thompson's eyes widened as he realized something far darker was afoot. The Deathworlders were not the true threat there. Was something even worse lurking beneath the surface, and he was being pulled into it, whether he liked it or not. Dr. Ward on the unknown planet. Dr. Ward had finally landed. The atmosphere was eerily quiet, and the ground was covered in strange, crystalline formations. The air seemed heavy, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. He stepped out of the pod cautiously, his boots crunching on the crystal-covered ground. The landscape was vast, stretching as far as he could see, with towering rock formations in the distance. It was beautiful, but there was an unnatural stillness that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as he ventured deeper into the planet's surface. His scanners began picking up signals patterns that seemed to match the alien language they had deciphered earlier. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he felt compelled to keep moving. Then the ground trembled. A deep rumble filled the air as a massive structure began to rise from the planet's crust. It was a Citian, ancient city, buried for centuries, and within that city, Dr. Ward would find the key to everything. The final revelation as the survivors each fought their battles and made their way toward their fates. One thing became clear. The galaxy was on the brink of an unimaginable war, with enemies far more ancient and powerful than the Deathworlders. The Keepers of the Void, the unknown alien forces, and the Deathworlders. All were interconnected in ways none of the survivors could have ever predicted. The galaxy's fate was in motion, but no one knew yet whether they would be the saviors of the galaxy or the ones to seal its doom.